Well, hello everybody and welcome. You have tuned in to episode number 433 of the most terrific amateur radio podcast on the internet. This is Linux in the Ham Shack, and tonight we are doing our short topics episode. So if you tuned into the last episode, you would know that it was our weekender. And if you tuned into the one before that, you would have listened to our deep dive episode on SDR++. And those are the three different formats we have here. So once again, tonight is short format, and before we dive into our topics for tonight, we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves, as I almost always remember to do. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
I'm Cheryl, W5MOO.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
All right, so let's get right into it. We don't actually have a lead topic for tonight. I'm surprised that Bill didn't take the opportunity to shove some scouts in here. Since
I could just make one up.
No, that's okay. We can. I think I put in some scout stuff later on. But if I didn't, oh well. I'm sure it'll get talked about at some point. But anyway, let's move on to our second segment, which is amateur radio topics. And Bill's got a nice assortment here of things we can talk about. And since I'm just reading copy right now, we'll let Bill hit the first one.
Alrighty, yeah, and this one is Radar, a new radio sport. This is Eddie, the Zulu Sierra. Zulu Sierra 6, Bravo November Echo, ZS6 BNEs, blogs about changes to the Rapid Deployment Amateur Radio Challenge. The Radar Challenge has been with us for many years, unusual ham radio fun. It was designed to cover a whole 24 hours with the hope of international radar-to-radar communications. It was mostly touch and go with no defined times, modes, or frequencies, and usually local groups made arrangements to meet somewhere, somehow on the bands. I want to take Radar to the next step starting in November as a trial run for future years. The 3 dates per year will remain, but the times will become shorter and planned using UTC as a reference time. My suggestion is that the Radar Sport Challenges start at 1400 local time in whatever time zone you live in, and the end time should be 1600 local. That gives you a full 2 hours to make as many deployments as possible. The requirement is still 5 QSOs per deployment point. Individuals or teams of individuals will line up at the start time. No motorized transport. You are either on your feet, on a bicycle, or in a canoe. And I almost said cannon because I was just reading it as I
suppose if you want to motivate yourself by human cannon, that would count, right? I mean,
yeah, travel by cannon. That would be awesome. Travel distances for on foot and canoes, as always, 1 kilometer and 2 kilometers if traveling by bicycle. This allows us to compare apples with apples. During the past few weeks, I have been developing the online Radar Sport Log and has been tested mainly by the CW guys in Zulu Sugar. South Africa, I believe. And it caters for radar grid exchanges. This online system will need to be used during the Radar Sport Challenges. It will allow the world to see the activities taking place throughout the world, and chasers can now have better opportunities to work radar sport participants. And they will have a general idea where the stations are active, having international access to the online logbook. And pretty interesting blog post, and that's from his personal blog there, the Zulu Sugar 6 Bravo November Echo blog, and we have it linked in the show notes. And this is an interesting radar has been an interesting concept all along. I've been kind of following it, I guess, for several years now, I believe. And it's interesting that it's growing, and he really wants to kind of take it to the next level.
All right, very cool. Sounds interesting. And I think you developed a new mode, Stroke SM, for Sideshow Mobile.
Sideshow Mobile.
Well, you can use trapeze, high wire, cannon,
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so moving on. Let's talk about the Transatlantic Centenary, the RSGB and the ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio. Do we not all know what that is?
This is from the RSGB, so context. Context is king.
Fair enough. And, I'm sure that most people in the UK would like to forget that America exists. But they have announced joint events to celebrate the achievement of transatlantic communications by radio amateurs 100 years ago in December 1921. Oh, and by the way, White Castle was founded in 1921 too. So there you go.
Sweet. Go get 100 burgers.
Yeah, we got 8 and couldn't eat them. ARRL sent Paul F. Godley, who held the U.S. call sign 2Z Echo, as their representative to listen for amateur signals from North America during the second transatlantic tests. Godley set up his listening equipment in Anderson on the west coast of Scotland, or Androssen, or something like that. He received the signals of more than 24 American amateur radio stations during the morning of December 12th in Scotland, the evening of December 11th here in the States. Godley received the first transatlantic message from the amateur radio station 1 Bravo Charlie Golf in Connecticut, operated by members of the Radio Club of America. The message read, Number 1, New York, check 12, CK12, to Paul Godley, Androssen, Scotland. Hearty congratulations. Signed, Burgard Inman, Grin Armstrong, Amy Cronkite. And this was probably Morse code too, so way to keep it brief. The successful Why did I say it was probably Morse code? Of course it was Morse code. It was probably Spark Gap. These successful transatlantic tests and the ones that followed in the next years would spur technological advances and new wireless distance records spanning the globe. The following events commemorate the centenary of these significant milestones that heralded the dawn of two-way international amateur radio communications. There will be multiple events in December to commemorate this event, which I'm sure we'll be telling you about sometime before December. Check the ARRL and RSGB sites for current and updated information. And as Bill said, that came from the RSGB. So for those of you who don't know, that's the Royal or Radio Society of Great Britain. So there you go. What'd you say?
I was just saying it's Riskabo.
Oh, Riskabo. Yeah, that's right. The Arl and Riskabo. Yeah. Sorry, I forgot we do that here. All right. Cheryl, do you want to read a story or no? Waiting for her to unmute.
What? Huh?
What? Huh? Do you want to read a story or do you want to hole up in your Facebook hole again?
I'm not on Facebook.
We just assume you're on Facebook, whether you are or not.
Well, I'm not, but I'm busy doing something.
All right, then we'll cover it. That's fine. You have your part later.
That.
Yeah,
all
fine.
Right, fine. All
Be
right.
that way. Go.
Fine, bye.
All right. So let's get into some open source topics, and Bill, we'll let you go ahead and cover the next one.
Sure. It's open source amateur radio satellite work not subject to export administration regulation. CEO Michelle Thompson, friend of the show, W5NYV, reports that Open Research Institute, ORI, received an advisory opinion from the U.S. Commerce Department Bureau of Industry and Security, the BIS, on September 2nd. The letter confirmed that public internet posts regarding open source amateur satellite communications work are not subject to export administration regulation, the EAR. ORI was founded in March 2018 by Bruce Perrins, K6BP, in order to provide a formal structure for open source satellite work. Prior work by ORI established we already know this, blah, blah.
Well, you're being inconsistent. It's not ORI, it's ORI.
ORI, that's right. Prior work by the ORI established that the open source amateur radio satellite communications work was free of international traffic in arms regulation. ITAR, ITARI, I don't know, whatever. This is, quote, this is significant regulatory success for open source amateur radio satellite work and open source in general, Thompson said. In a later post on the ORI site, Thompson said ITAR and EAR have a dramatic effect on both commercial and amateur satellite work since the 1990s. Quote, the regulations are blamed for significant decline in the U.S. market share for satellite systems and halted highly successful international amateur collaborations. End quote, she wrote. Open source work that is published as it is created and is freely available to the general public at no cost is not subject to ITAR or EAR, Thompson said. And this was from reported by the ARRL.
All right, very good. Well, I don't know if that's going to help, but let's assume that it does in some way. So, because there's a lot of open source satellite stuff going on. Yeah, it's cool. Not subject to these crazy regulations.
Be held up by red tape and everything else like that.
Exactly. Especially for these tiny little like CubeSats and stuff. It's like, who gives a crap? Just throw them up there. Let them run into the ISS and destroy it or something.
Yeah.
All right. So next we have announcing Azure credits for open source projects. Open source software is an integral part of development at Microsoft, aligned with our goal to empower all developers to be successful building any application using any language on any platform. We are committed to building open, flexible technology and working with the open source community to grow together as an industry. Today, we're excited to announce a program to give back to that community. Azure credits for open source projects. Well, you have to say it that way, right? Because otherwise it's just Azure. Yeah.
Azure.
This program grants Azure credits to open source projects for a year. Developers will be able to use these credits for testing, storage, or other development. Any project and any technology with an open source initiative, OSI or OC, approved license is eligible to apply. We've already extended these grants to some projects in the open source ecosystem, including, this must be Microsoft.
Yes.
FreeBSD, Alma Linux, Haskell, SnakeMate, and Prometor.
Dun,
And yes,
dun, dun.
that came from the Microsoft open source blog, the MOSBA. So, yeah, cool. So, develop open source and get Azure. So or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. I have been enjoying WSL, though, or Whistle.
Whistle?
Whistle.
Whistle 2?
I whistle while I work.
But not the Whistle G. You like the Whistle 2, but not the Whistle G.
The Whistle 2, but not the Whistle G. Yeah, Whistle G has its issues, at least for me so far. But that brings up an interesting point because Windows 11 is released next Tuesday. So I wonder how many things blow up.
Well, I know ever since they started spamming computers, Windows 10 computers that are up there in preview and stuff like that, that have like the latest, 20H2 or something like that, whatever the
21H2, something like that.
Yeah, 21H2 build. Like one of my computers, which is that Dell XPS 13, kind of backwards foldy, craptastic computer. It will not be able to upgrade to Windows 11 because the processor, all being as weak as it is not approved. However, ever since I started seeing those Windows 11 messages, my computer has been intermittently booting to recovery mode and acting like it's going to die really soon. So maybe Microsoft is killing off all the old computers that are running Windows 10. They said there will no computers running Windows 10 after we're done. So
we're taking a page out of Apple's book and doing like massive IO writes.
Yeah.
Just to get the system to implode.
Yeah, something's going on with it. I finally got it to boot just yesterday, and I started backing it up, and I'm like, well, I'm just not turning it off anymore. So it's no longer a laptop. It's it's a always on desktop until I get the company to replace that one. So because it is a company laptop for one of them. So yeah, unfortunate.
All right. Well, anyway, there you go. Azure credits was where that came from. So, and we drifted into Windows 11.
Yes.
I guess that's going to be a topic of discussion, I'm sure, coming up real soon now, even on this show.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's move into our fourth segment, which is actually our third segment, Linux in the Ham Shack. And the first one we have is something Bill's going to tell you about. We might as well keep swapping back and forth, right? So
yeah, might as well. Yeah, this is Phosphor Amateur Radio #Ham Sunday #open source. Amateur ham radio operators have been experimenting with ways to use computers in their hobby since the PCs became widely available, perhaps even before then. While many people picture hams either talking into a microphone or tapping a telegraph key, many hams now type on a keyboard or even click buttons on a computer screen or write programs to click the buttons for them to make contacts. Even hams who still prefer to talk or use Morse code may still use computers for some things, such as logging contacts or predicting radio conditions. While most hams use Windows, there is no shortage of ham radio software for Linux. The LWN article that was contributed by Sam Sloniker, KJ7RRV, was basically linked to an Adafruit blog, which I thought the blog had the story, but then I went in and actually dug into the article, and the guy, I'm sure it's a dude, right? Sam could be a woman, but you never know. But yeah, he kind of goes over all the applications that are out there, like ham clock and Xlog and FT8 and WSJT-X, so on and so forth. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of just sort of just general information. And scrolling down, and look who mentions. There's someone who mentions Linux in the Ham Shack. So this is why it got included here. And that user is a subscriber by the name of Downey. So Downey, if you're listening to us, thank you very much. He says it's not software, but related good source I found for tracking new and existing software and related free and open source software development in amateur radio is the Linux in the Ham Shack podcast. And the website is lhspodcast.info. So, hey, thanks for the shout out. Apparently, the author of the article here, Sam, did not know about us. So hopefully he soon will be a listener as well. So thanks for propagating, the availability of what we're doing here. Downey. So that's really why I included that in our open source Linux in the Ham Shack segment.
Well, fantastic. That's excellent. Thank you, Downey, for getting out the good word, because otherwise I felt like this article was written in 2011 rather than 2021, because kind of read that way. We're all using Windows and there's no, trying to promote Linux and stuff. That's what we were doing 10 years ago. So moving on, we have Bill probably put this next one in here because of doing a new build of the Linux in the Ham Shack distro, and then this came out 3 days later.
Bastards.
Hey now. WSJT-X 2.5.0 general availability release is available. It provides features and capabilities new since version 2.3, including the Q65 mode and improved rig control. New features are described in the WSJT-X user guide and in the release notes. If you will use the new Q65 mode, please read the quick start guide to Q65. On Windows platforms, WSJT-X 2.5 also includes MAP65 3.0.0, a wideband polarization matching tool intended for EME, or EME, or EME.
Emmy.
EME, yes. If you will use MAP65, be sure to read the quick start guide to WSJT-X 2.5.0 and MAP65 3.0. Just, read the docs is what they're saying.
Upgrading or TFM, right?
Right. TLDR. Okay. Upgrading from a previous version will be straightforward. There is no need to uninstall or move any files. If you want to make sure to have the latest list of default working frequencies, go to Files, Settings, Frequencies, right-click in the Working Frequencies list, and select Reset. And that came straight from the WSJT-X project.
Yeah.
So, go.
Yeah, mine just updated today on the Arch system. So it finally, someone whoever maintains that particular package has updated it, and runs fine. No problems here. But I have been following the mailing list for the WSJT-X, and there are still a few outliers out there that have having random issues, including some Linux users. So hopefully those are just isolated events and there's not a broader issue going on. But I've heard some weirdness with not able to transmit audio, and then a couple other just random things. But they seem pretty random. So I think you should probably have no issues with loading 2.5.0. And since you mentioned the disk, I probably will remaster that, probably this weekend.
All right. So if you're going to download the Linux in the Ham Shack Ubuntu version, wait for a couple of days so Bill can get this latest version of WSJT-X in there. And as I recall, it also includes SDR++. So
yes, it does. Yeah.
All right. So check that out. It's a good way to go in your Ham Shack.
I don't know if we actually mentioned that on the show. Did we? Because I made it for when was your Ham Fest?
Well, Saturday. So
so yeah,
not.
we haven't even mentioned it. So yeah, I did master a new version of the disc, even though we're telling you to wait till we remaster it one more time. But there is a Ubuntu build with the XFCE front end, Ubuntu LTS 20.04.3 up on our ISO's site. So you can check that out, and I'll basically update it just once more just to put the latest version of WSJT-X on it. But it has all the usual goodies, including I actually replaced the wallpaper on it. So inside of live mode, you'll actually see the wallpaper. So I figured a way to get that in there, and it should show up once you install it as well. Of course, you can change it to something else. It doesn't matter. It doesn't bother me whatsoever. What else did I put on there? JS8 call, the latest version's on there. Obviously 2.4.0 WSJTX is on there. SDR++ 1.0.3 is on there. And then all your normal ham radio pure blend stuff is on there. The latest version of CQR log 2.5.2 along with MariaDB is on there. So yeah, well, Dan, yeah, it does have GNU radio. I mean, technically, if you install GQRX, you get most of the GNU radio stuff bundled in. I saw your blog post on that, and Dan just mentioned that in the chat room, KB6NU. Yeah, a lot of the software that's out there does have pieces and components from the GNU radio project. So probably a lot more people have it than realize that they're using it. They just don't use the GNU radio builder to actually do the fundamental blocks and stuff like that. But they're definitely using GNU radio derived software and plugins and everything else. So yeah, and you should have some stickers showing up to your house for your laptop. And that's all I got.
Okay, excellent. Well, and that's all we've got for topics. Actually, we're down to almost the end of the show, but now we're going to try and drag Cheryl back in, kicking and screaming, because this is the part of the show that she does, which is our social media roundup. And I didn't hear any clicks or anything, but I'm going to assume that she's there and she's going to pick up right when I stop talking and go ahead and do the social media roundup. So here we go.
Okay, so for our Patreons, we have Gary Tibbetts, Bryce Johnston, David Scarf, David Slaughter, Jim Lawson, Patrick Ang, Douglas Schock, Eric Guth, Brandon Rozek, John Spriggs, Robert Lewis, Robert Pitts, Douglas Redder, David Jakeway, Darren King, Cubicle Nate, Erna Gustalis, Samuel Vimes, Peter Caffrey, Richard Gordon, Paul Griffith, Jonas Rulo, Donald Geber, Erd Garcia, Steve Sainer, Steve Metcalf, William Heckelman, Randolph Smith, and Andy Webster. For our subscriptions, we have Paul Mooney, Chris DeLuca, Andy Cowley, Eric Muller, Carl Backus, Isaac Gear, Thomas Foy, Michael Burdack, Kevin Ivey, Tony Coverley, Ronald Ike, Johnny Kinsey, Peter Spots, Fred Cole, Bill Piotr, Jeffrey Boris, Robert Halliday, Wayne Hale, John Clark, Steve Hepler, Michael Jopling, Roger Pereira, Howard Dittmer, Todd Bowers, Michael Carey, A. Taylor, Dylan Angle, Jim McKenzie, Bill Collins, Robert Black, Darren King, Randolph Smith, Robert Yerke, Steve Biella, Alan Wilson, Mark Farrell, and Jeff Zimmerman. On Facebook, Frank Austin joined us. On Twitter, we had @JeffSoapySmith. On YouTube, we had C. Birchfield, Paul Griffith, W6BZY, Shane, VK5ZSL, Andrew Hines, SM6ELK, Bruce, Slowmo53, Kuberkus, Caleb Chernish, John Graffio, and Vernon Deal. On Discord, we had JK, which is N0ES, and Sapo Lion, and we had nobody join us on the mailing list, and no merchandise sales.
All right. Well, that is it. That takes us down to the end of the program, our short topics, and of course, our social media roundup. And are you shaking a cocktail over there?
I was taking a drink.
Yeah.
She's getting ready for the last episode.
I just read like 3,000 names. I needed a drink.
I got to be a little bit of a little dry throat.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, nothing like a little cottonmouth when you're trying to read.
Exactly.
All right. So anyway, that takes us down to the end of the program. This was our short topics episode. But before we go ahead and get on out of here, we want to mention the folks who are listening to us live, or at least the ones we know about who are listening to us live. We had Don, KC9ZMY, Tony, K4XSS, Ted, WA0EIR, Dave, W3DJS, and Dan, KB6NU. So thanks everybody for listening, and thank you to all those who download the show every week or every week and a half, or how, I don't know. It's 3 times in 2 weeks. I don't know. There must be some word for that, but yeah. But anyway, thanks to all of you who download and listen and make the show worth doing. And for those of you who support us financially, we really appreciate it. Helps keep the lights on and keeps all the stuff that we do going. And every little bit helps. So if you can support us financially, please do, but the show will always be free to download and listen because that's how we wanted it from the beginning, and that's how it will be until we stop doing it, whenever that is. But anyway, let's go ahead and get on out of here, and we hope you'll come back for our next deep dive episode, episode 434, which will be very soon after you download and hear this one. But this has been episode number 433 of Linux in the Ham Shack. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
I'm Cheryl, W5MOO.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD 73.